Perfect. Great. Thanks so much, everyone, for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here. As Amy mentioned, I'm a final year PhD student now in Trinity College Dublin, and the aim of my PhD is to understand mental health functioning among college students with particular attention to childhood trauma. And over the last sort of 3.5 years, we have used several research methods and applied some different strategies to understand this relationship with qualitative, quantitative, some real-time data collection and things like that, which we will talk about that in details here. We will briefly look at some latest research done on trauma relating to mental health problems in college students. And then we will take a look about why we need to start considering also the impact of positive childhood experiences, when studying the relationship between ACEs and mental health. And lastly, if we have some time, I also want to very briefly talk about some future directions of how to proceed with ACE research, and can we use some different techniques, except the qualitative way or cross-sectional way of using it, such as ecological momentary assessment as a technique to understand causality between ACEs and mental health. So thanks for being here again. And I just want to start with what we already know. And some of you already know that mental health problems among college students have become a big concern in recent years. And a lot of research has indicated significant number of college students struggling with mental health issues like anxiety, depression, suicide, stress. And though higher education is associated with personal and professional advantages, the college years of some students are characterized by a range of stressors, such as economic challenges, excessive, alcohol use, social isolation, bullying, and psychological distress. Students who have accumulated a number of negative and potentially traumatic life events, such as adverse childhood experiences, might find this a bit more difficult or stressful than other individuals. ACEs do refer to as negative life events that individuals encounter during the first 18 years of their life. They could include neglect, abuse, maltreatment, and dysfunction such as domestic violence, divorce, things like that to encounter. So now, based on the previous literature associated with ACEs and psychopathology, our first study aimed to develop a multidimensional model where we collected data from 321 college students. The paper is available online, open access. Let me know if you need a link for that. It's widely available. So if you want to read it in more detail. But in a nutshell, the aim of this paper was to examine the relationship between ACEs and psychopathology in college students. So we explored whether some affective states like belongingness, burdensomeness, mediate the relationship between trauma and suicide ideation, and whether psychological distress could moderate this relationship. And our results suggested that ACEs are positively associated with suicide ideation, and this association is partially explained by these affective states. And the findings do underscore the importance of addressing the psychological impact of ACEs and the need for interventions that target both the individual's distress and their social connectedness. However, while several studies, including our first-hand research conducted, have found links between ACEs and mental health issues in college students, very less is known about these positive childhood experiences. You may wonder what they are. They refer to experiences and interactions during childhood that promote healthy development, well-being, and healthy social connections and things like that. And studying these experiences is important in the context of mental health, but also and childhood trauma, because it can help inform several interventions and prevention strategies, and we're going to talk about some of them later on as well. But before that, I want to talk also about something that is a concept that is very similar to the concept of positive experiences and childhood trauma, is resilience. in a simple layman definition, resilience is sort of the ability to bounce back from and flexibly adapt to the changing demands or sort of outcomes of stressful experiences that we experience. Two of the most commonly studied framework that guide our thinking about how promotive factors may counteract or guard against this negative effect of risks are compensatory and protective factor models of resilience by Zimmerman. The compensatory model proposes that promotive factors offset the effects of risk factors and have the opposite effect on an outcome, operating directly and independently to the risks. On the other hand, the protective model of resilience suggests that interaction between promotive and risk factors reduce the probability of a negative outcome as promotive factors moderate the negative effects of the exposure to risk. So the primary goal of our study that we wanted to conduct with including positive childhood experiences was to apply these compensatory and protective factor model of resilience to help explain how ACEs and positive experiences relate to mental health and the construction of resilience in young college-going people. Within the context of the compensatory model, we anticipated that irrespective of an individual's number of ACE, their positive experiences will have an independent and direct positive association with mental health functioning. Further, positive experiences will also protect against poor mental health and promote well-being. As you can see from question 1, can positive experiences neutralize the negative effects of ACEs on mental health outcomes? And then the promotive factor model, where we note that promotive resources serve to moderate the relationship between risk factor and outcomes. So it is anticipated that the relationship between ACEs and mental health functioning will be lower among those with higher positive childhood experience scores. So you can see this is the second question that we wanted to outline. So what we expected from from question 1 or in general is that positive experiences scores predicted greater resilience, less psychological distress, and less suicide ideation. But more importantly, for our first main question, if positive experiences can neutralize the negative effects of ACEs on mental health outcomes, indicated that the associations between ACEs and psychological distress and suicide ideation did remain significant. However, their strength of their slopes estimates and their significance level decreased. So lastly, to investigate the moderating impact of positive childhood experiences, we found that the relationship between ACEs and poor mental health outcomes were stronger among those with less than or equal to the average positive childhood experience score as compared to those with more than the average number of positive childhood experience scores. So those were the main key findings that we found with this sample of students, and with that in mind, as I mentioned before, is we all know who are working in the area of youth mental health or childhood trauma or things like that, that ACEs are common in college students, and this pattern has established universally. You have several studies done in Ireland. You have several studies in the UK, in the US, India. That ACEs are very common among the college community, but this study showcases, and several other studies have also showcased that positive childhood experiences are also very common in college students. With our study finding, with at least 90% reporting at least 4 of the 10 positive experiences from their childhood that we asked them. Findings from this present study specifically highlights the importance of positive childhood experiences on later well-being and place value on creating and implementing certain strategies or policy frameworks within the the university setting that certainly recognizes the importance of these early positive experiences. So this is still under discussion. We're still, working. Our next research phase is qualitative interviews with some key stakeholders, where we are really trying to talk about these interventions or frameworks that we can try to instigate or implement in university settings. Another important aspect is that eliminating certain childhood trauma, childhood adversities, such as, several illnesses or death of a family member, is not really possible. However, maximizing positive childhood experiences may be a more practical and achievable goal in that regard. And positive childhood experiences can mitigate these harmful effects of ACEs by supporting children in building resilience when faced with difficulties. And some very, very small amount of studies have been done on this in this regard. But what the studies that have been done, I think on top of my head, I can remember one of the studies published in Child Abuse and Neglect journal that also outlined that positive childhood experiences were able to moderate or mitigate the harmful effects of ACEs on students. However, it was a broader sample done in, not just specifically towards college students. But understanding the long-term correlations of ACEs and positive childhood experiences among these college students, and full engagement with the higher education sector, can really help in improving assessments of students' needs and providing targeted intervention. Trauma-informed approach is something that could be really, really important. I have talked about trauma-informed culture in my last presentation that I had with Smartin, so I'm not going to be going too much into detail on that. But that's another really important way of looking at things. Engaging with students to acknowledge the adversities they face, but also leveraging existing strength in one important way is another way forward of looking at this. Before I finish off, I wanted to also have a little, a question I wanted to propose, or also wanted to have a chat about, is the fact that how can we engage more with this, with childhood trauma research, or how can we improvise it or improve it? And one question I want to answer and propose is that, can we understand the causal relationships that we have, relationships of childhood experiences and mental health functioning in real time, or through the usage of ecological momentary assessment, where we collect data in several data points and over a certain period, over a certain specific period of time? So the answer might be yes. So our very preliminary research as of now aims to exemplify an exploratory methodology that can be used in both clinical and general settings to understand the importance of association between childhood trauma and affective states. So affective states could be emotion, positive affect, negative affect. This is measured through emotion dynamics. So you have emotion instability, emotion inertia, variability in emotions, and things like that. So another rationale of this for us specifically was to use this exploratory approach is it can also help us in identifying a link when two variables are not conditionally independent, given responses from the previous sort of measurements in this time series and responses from the current windows of measurement. So, I don't want to get too technical into these details, but we can see, you can see from this, this figure here, which is sort of the observed negative affects of an individual over 2-day period, over 21 days. Actually, there's a typo there. It's a 21 days with highest score and lowest score. So you see figure A, where you have around 42 assessments over a 21-day period, which is three weeks. And you see that an individual here with in figure 1 has it is how how skewed it is towards the negative side. So before I mention this, I want to also talk a little bit about the idea how we did this and what our approach was in collecting the data. So we first collected some baseline measures such as childhood experiences with the ACE questionnaire and positive childhood experiences, and then we collected data in real time through this app called Eureka, which is a non-profit citizen science app. Everyone can download it. I think now it's available worldwide, which is used for brain health research. And we tracked participants for 21 days, and they were asked questions on a 3-week period through ecological momentary assessment study for positive and negative emotions. So they were asked 16 questions regarding emotions sort of related to positive experience affects like I feel happy, or negative emotions like I feel guilty, or things like that. They were asked twice per day in the morning and evening. So we had 2 data points every day. And EMA items in Eureka were rated on a 7-point Likert scale, varying from 1 to 7. And participants were able to select a 3-hour window during which the assessment would randomly appear. And although a multi-mood, that the methodology we used is sort of a very robust way of looking at assessments and time series when you're doing work on that. So you look at figure 1. So it's an example of how affective states may vary between individuals with high and low ACE score over a 21-day period. So figure 1A, it is an individual with an ACE score of 8 out of potentially 12. So you can see it's comparatively a very high ACE score. And you see that the negative affect is skewed towards the high end of the negative affect score there. But there is also very less fluctuation in the score, and more remains static on the higher end of the score. But in figure 1B, we see an individual with an ACE score of 1 out of 12, where negative affect fluctuates more relative to the individual with high ACE score in figure A. But as we have to take this with a bit more speculation, in a way that there could be a lot of other confounding things that might be happening with that. So we also then looked at the idea. Looked at the idea of an overall sample. So we had around 54 students that were doing this for 21-day period. So we found mean effects differences as well in overall sample, as you can see in figure 2.1 and 2.2. It shows the stratified data by top and bottom quartile of ACE scores when we observe the mean, negative, and positive affect scores across these participants over 21 days. So you see those black lines, a lot of black lines that they represent individual time series. The gray ribbon is sort of the 95% confidence interval that we see there. And then the blue line is the mean across participants at the same assessment time frame. So from figure 2.2A, you see individuals in this bottom quartile of ACEs were shown to have lower mean negative affect scores as compared to participants in the top quartile of the ACEs. So you can see there. And on the other hand, when we look at the mean positive affect scores, which is figure 2B on the bottom of your screen, participants in bottom quartile of the ACE score had higher mean positive affect scores as compared to those in top quartile of the ACEs. So here, the variances between top and bottom quartiles are not really different, but the same amount of variance in the negative affect time series, so that the mean effect is not merely just confounded by having a higher variance in the top quartile ACE. So this is the study is still in progress. The study, we are still analyzing a few last bits of the data that we have presented, or that we have outlined, and I'm hoping to understand this in a bit more detail, to acknowledge or understand the main sort of research question that we always wanted to outline, is to use, can we use this measure as a way of looking at causality with childhood trauma and and mental health functioning. There have been a few studies that have been already conducted, especially in I think in some universities by Peter Kuppens, who works a lot with childhood trauma and real-time monitoring, and he's done a really good job in explaining these things. So the only downside of limitation, I would say, of using these methodologies, speaking from an experience perspective, is you need quite a lot of time with participants, and you need a good amount of data for doing between subject analysis rather than intra-individual analyses or within subject analyses in a way. So that is a limitation that I think everyone needs to really think about. And also, funding is a big part in this, because the attrition rate of participants who do not, if you don't pay them, is 80% higher than participants you pay. So we were very lucky enough that we got funding for this project, and we were able to pay those 54 people, over that 3-week period that they completed the Eureka study. So I just want to finish up here, and thanks so much for your time and listening. So happy to take some questions.